Hello and welcome back. Today I'm building the Citroën Fourgon HY van in 1/24th scale by Hella. This kit was tooled about 10 years ago, so it's relatively recent and it's quite detailed. As you can see here, the body builds up with many different parts. It's all moulded in this grey styrene. I'm working here using this Tamiya cement to start on the underside, the chassis, that sort of thing. These parts were warped in a couple of places, so just try to make sure that the joins are as secure as possible when you're fixing these. As you can see here, there's two different options for the rear wheel arch. I'm going with the slightly more modern sort of rectangular opening. The rounded openings were used on the vehicle from its launch. Now doing the sides. The signature corrugated metal panels were added to provide rigidity to the van. It's important to test fit this as much as possible because you need to make sure that these joins are all good and proper. I'm trying to assemble as much of this as I can before priming and painting, but I know that I won't be able to assemble the entire bodywork before adding the paint. This panel on the left side of the van was particularly bad, so as you can see it's bending away, so I had to push that into place. And it was a bit more secure when I added these panels here, which cover over the wheel and the spare wheel section. Had to hold that secure for a little while. As you can see here, a lot of the panels are on the clear sprue. That's good for the windows. I presume that this section here is clear so that you could leave the engine exposed if you wanted to. Got two choices with the radiator, this smaller Citroën Chevron logo for the more modern car. And then to mask off the windows, I'm using this Tamiya masking sheet. I think, and if anyone from Hella is listening, I think what would really help is if in the instruction booklet you included the actual sizes. Because whilst what I did was I got the approximate shape and then sort of pressed in around the edges and then used a craft knife to get it as close to the correct shape as possible. This took a really long time, and I think if you had those shapes in your instructions, then that would save a lot of time. Now obviously you do need to worry about poly cement fogging up clear parts, so I was really frugal with this Tamiya extra thin. Got this little air vent thing which goes in the front here. There we are. Tried to build up this as much as possible before adding any paint. As you can see, all the windows are moulded into the panels themselves, so you need to mask these. Remember to mask them on the inside as well as outside. For the rear window, you've got a smaller original window or a larger, more modern window. That's the one I'm going for. Now the look I'm going for here is a French mobile post office. These were things introduced in the 1960s to help serve rural areas in the signature yellow of the French Postal Service, and that's going to require a bit of custom parts for the interior, as you'll see very soon. Now this was all primed in white, making sure to get a really even coating on those clear parts, so I don't want this to look translucent. There it is after priming. And now I'm using some Tamiya Lemon Yellow. This is thinned 50-50 with the lacquer thinner. And I'm using this through my Galeri Swallowtail airbrush. And there you are. Now you can see I can build up some of the extra parts, including this surround for the rear opening. I added this now because it helped create the proper width for the roof section. It's also important to paint the inside of this. And then once that was all dry, I went over the floor with some Revell semi-gloss black. Also masked around the sides, although you can't see that here because the tape is yellow, just to try to keep it as clean and crisp as possible. Similarly, I trimmed around the edge of the windows with some more masking tape, then used a fine brush to add this semi-gloss black. This wasn't perfect, had to touch up this quite a little bit. I made sure to neaten up this where I could, but also I made it look a little bit rough and ready because I wanted this to look like it had been a used vehicle. For these window trims, I used a bit of Sharpie. Found this went on quite well. It's a fine Sharpie, so nice and accurate. So again, just like before, I found it needed a little bit of cleaning up, but I also ran a little bit of black panel line accent round the inside just to sort of fill up any gaps. Now I wanted to add some parts to the interior, so I looked up pictures of what a real Bureau Mobile would have looked like. Here you can see this desk with the clear window. So I cut out some styrene sheets and glued that all together to assemble this desk. This was a little bit too wide, so I narrowed it down a little bit before putting it into place. There you can see. Now this had been painted a sort of satin white. Here's a little chair that I got from my Fujimi garage set. I added some score marks to show where there would be an opening in the desk, and also added some aluminium tape just for some of the sort of metal parts, things like the hinge and the kick plate and things like that. I masked around the top to then add this wood brown to create a sort of wood effect for the countertop. I found that the brush strokes looked a little bit like wood grain. Let me know what you think. After doing this, I also dry brushed on a little bit of dark brown. And there it is. The little chair. I extended the desk around to one side to create a little shelf, and then under that I added this little post box. Used a bit of the aluminium foil to look like the letter slot and a small little silver keyhole, and that just slid under place. I used this clear acetate for the window, again using a bit of aluminium tape for the hinges, and that'll glue onto the edge there. I created some little shelves underneath, and this little filing cabinet. There we are. It's a bit rough and ready in places, but I think it looks alright. is this little slot section here for some pamphlets and things like that. I found these spare decals in the spare box and then created this little bench seat on the other side with a bit of felt. Now for the engine and front suspension. Now if you watch my unboxing you might have noticed that I was missing a piece. I have sent a spares request to Hella, but I've not yet got the spare part. It's the oil sump which goes at the bottom of the engine, and I realised that as it's not integral, obviously it would be if it was a real engine, I decided I'd build it anyway, and then I can always add that on afterwards. Here's the halves of the engine and gearbox, and you can see the oil sump will go underneath on that. So some of the parts I painted in advance, like these belts, mainly in black, but a bit of green because the engine's supposed to be green. Here now adding the radiator section as well. The detail of this kit is pretty good. You can see how the top of the engine has been added in a bit of silver. I believe that this was the same engine as was used in the Traction Avant. Therefore it's front wheel drive. Now these I wasn't so keen on. I actually think it probably would have been a good idea to add these arms before all of this spiderweb of stuff was added. Now the wheels are made up of 3 parts. You've got the front and the rear, then you've got the tyre, and then I should say it is 4 parts actually, because you've got a small little chrome hub that goes on the outside. These were painted in steel and the little hub on the outside in chrome, all from Vallejo. And here you've got 5 tyres, all on this rubber sprue, so need to be cut out first. So 4 for the vehicle and a spare as well, which is always a nice touch. There we are. Spare one just slots in like so. No need for any glue here, this is all a very tight fit. Now for these ones on the front axle, I found it was a good idea to add these before putting them on, because as often with these front suspension, these parts are all very, very fragile. Later on I actually added a bit of super glue and just held these in place. Now, that meant that the steering mechanism wouldn't work anymore, but it was very, very fragile and fell off a couple of times. So I figured having it stay in the right place was more important. You do have this little controlling arm in case you do want the steering to work. Some pipes that go underneath. And here you can see how that will look when it goes underneath. I'll leave that off for now and add it later. Seats here were painted in Vallejo Hull Red. You've got a couple of little attachments underneath. I actually saw that these were mainly black on the real cars, but I did this one in silver anyway. As you can see, I painted the floor of the cabin in semi-gloss black, and now adding the 2 seats. This is quite fiddly, so gently does it. There we are. And then you've got things like the handbrake, gear stick and the pedals on the floor. Now for the pedals, I think it's the 2 on the right and the far left one that need to be filled here. You've got a small hole on the other side, which will be for the steering wheel later on. And there's the engine and front suspension. As I say, good idea to attach the wheels before gluing this all on. You can see the underside here. I've added a little bit of weathering in places. I'll do a little bit more later. You've got an exhaust pipe that goes from the engine, and there we are, just adding that now. The rear wheels have a sort of shock absorber which goes on either side. You can see that there. Just gluing that into place, and then the wheel simply clips over the top. Now there should be a little speaking hole in the window, so I used a hole punch for that. And as well, there's some little stickers to go on that. So I've got this little bank card one here. Just testing where it will go, using a bit of super glue to attach that. Got a little poster that I found online, an old Post poster about a guide to the summer. And as well as its post office, I need to give it a till cash register. So I cut all these pieces out of styrene and then glued them all together. It's about 2.5 centimetres long by about 2 centimetres wide. Check that it was the right size. Then that was painted in a light grey, and I added a little sticker for the keys and a little black screen at the top. And then I used a small amount of cement to glue that into place. I used some decals to add some other things, these sheets of stamps to one side. There's a little thing there about opening times, that sort of thing. Added this little display with some Parisian postcards, which I glued to the outside as well. There we are. Let me know what you think. There's a little chair. Whoops. And I did a couple of parcels, just making those out of a spare bit of packing material, that sort of thing. Got these little kick plates, at least I think they're kick plates. This is a sort of step at the front to help you get in. And then you've got indicators at the front, just did a little bit of aluminium around the housings for those. And also masked around the Citroën logo. Some of the instructions have the entire radiator done in black, but I was happy with how it looked just with the yellow paint. Used a small amount of PVA just to add these tail lights. Got orange ones at the top and red ones at the bottom. Then there's a round reflector that goes underneath that, so I did the rubber edge with some black Sharpie, and then the centre with a bit of a red Sharpie. I was pretty happy with this actually, this is quite fine work. Fuel filler cap on the side in silver, and then the indicators on the front in orange. Now there's a very, very fine chrome trim that goes around the front of the radiator here. So I used a bit of plumber's aluminium tape cut to a very thin size. And I was pleased with this because I didn't think I'd be able to do a good job painting this. So I'm pleased with how this turned out. Let me know what you think. Got the number plates here, 3 options. I went with this one with 2015 on it. I was a bit worried that they may not have used these kind of plates, considering this was a Civic vehicle. I'm not sure. I know that at one point France used white plates at the front and yellow on the rear like we do in the UK, but now they just use white plates, so maybe if someone knows better they might be able to tell me if this is accurate or not. Wipers at the front done in silver with a bit of black Sharpie for the rubber trim. Now the real versions of these vans actually had windows in the side, but I decided not to add those. I just didn't think it would look very good. But I did copy the decals as best as possible and position them where I thought I'd like to see them. I believe that PTT stands for Post, Telegrams and Telephone. And then eventually they split into La Poste and France Telecom, which is now orange. I did font match the writing though, so I was happy with that. Now the headlights are in yellow and with a little silver surround at the front and the interior. These are actually the same headlights as used on the 2CV, or at least the original 2CV. And you've got little silver supports that glue them in like so. Handles go on either side of the windscreen. She needs to drill these holes open a little bit more. And the steering wheel goes here. That's all in black. Now this kind of slots down into place. Need to do this very carefully. And you've got a little cover for the spare wheel that goes on like so. Now the roof did actually take me a really long time. It looks very quick here. The instructions suggest adding the windscreen section first, but I found it made more sense this way, lining it up. Here, you try it yourself. Now, one of the door hinge sections on this side had actually snapped off, so I just put this into place as best as possible and just held it there. I could have glued it, but decided not to. Now what I realised though is that this engine cover here actually should have gone in before because it doesn't fit here, so I actually had to remove the front cover and add that in. Now the doors also need to be drilled through to add the door handles to the inside and the outside. Now these doors have got a little hinge section that should let you kind of slide them into place so they can open and close. I never really found that it worked particularly well, so in the end I just removed the hinge section and kept the doors closed. Now just gluing those headlights into place. There you are. Now the front and rear bumper I glued on here, but later I realised that usually they were either painted the same as the body colour or black, so I actually went over them with a little bit of semi-gloss black. Decided to keep the side door open so you could see inside the office. It's a shame that covered up the fuel cap and a bit of the writing, but there we are. You can still see inside. Now the tailgate at the back is made up of two sections, so I needed to cut these all in half. Bureau Mobile on either one, and then the PTT logo, which you might notice it's also reversed depending on which way it's pointing. That was cut in half and used a bit of Mr. Mark setter to help glue that down. There we are. Not bad. And if you want to keep this open, you want to keep those little hinge sections and slot this into place. Found that one of them didn't need any glue and the other one did. There's the top section, I'll add that in a moment. And I also added another PTT logo to the front here. There's a little bit of super glue to attach that on. Obviously you can close it if you prefer, but I was going to keep it open so you could look inside. There are some supports that go on the rear opening here. You can see them just about in those silver sections. Now unfortunately the supports for the wing mirrors, I'd lost one of them, so I decided to make some new ones out of a bit of this silver jeweler's wire, bent that into right angles at the ends, and then the mirrors themselves were painted silver with a bit of aluminium tape on the back. So I used a bit of super glue to attach these. There we are. And I decided to add another one of those posters to the outside, as these often did have posters on the outside. So I used a bit of that clear plastic to go over the top. Added a bit of a black trim around the outside as well. And there we are, it's finished. Well, I've customised this quite a bit more than it is in the kit, but I'm pretty pleased with how it's turned out. This is a challenging kit, not for the faint-hearted. I'll give it a BOAB score. Value is 4 out of 5. This retails for about £25 to £30, which isn't too bad. Assembly, I'm going to give it a 2. This is a very challenging kit and would have been helped with some window masks. Accuracy seems pretty decent. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Quality is fair, I would say. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Legacy, though, this is an iconic French van, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. That gives it a total of 18 out of 25, which is pretty good. I'd say if you're a fan of these kind of French vehicles, this is a must. And this is quite a lot cheaper than the Japanese-made Ebro kit. Anyway, let me know what you think down below. Have you built one of these? What did you think of my modifications as well? I'm pretty pleased with this, but yeah, leave a comment, hit the like button, it really helps. Subscribe if you haven't done so far, and I'll see you soon.